welcome back to House to Home. We're so excited because we're recording today's episode from our very own SoConCon here in Indianapolis. My name is Grace Youngson, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Joseph Kohm. This is a podcast brought to you by Family Policy Alliance Foundation. And without further ado, Joseph, will you tell us more about what we're doing here?
Yes, I would love to, Grace. Thank you. Excellent. Yes, we're here from Indianapolis at SoConCon 2025. So folks are probably asking, what is SoConCon? SoConCon stands for Social Conservative Policy Conference. This is FPA's premier conference. It happens every year. We started it a few years ago, and it's morphed into the premier gathering for social conservative policymakers and influencers in America. So this year we are here at Indianapolis. This conference is also happening concurrently with two of our other conferences that we're putting on every year, which is our State Family Policy Conference. We bring together all the state family policy councils from across the country, convene them here to strategize and do business. And it's also happening with our Statesman Academy, which happens also every year. That's our training academy for newly minted state legislators who are people of faith. We train them in biblical worldview and how to effectively apply that worldview in their work as politicians in their state houses. That's happening all week. So you have all three conferences going on at the same time. We jokingly call it the mega conference on our staff, but it makes for great cross-pollination. And for your sake, as a House to Home listener, it makes for great guests. So we're going to have a lot of good guests on this week, Grace. I think our audience is really going to be excited about that. We're going to be sampling our speakers, giving you a little peek into the conference. And the next episode or two, at least, will be made up of short, probably 10-minute-ish interviews with these guests because we want to make the most of their time and of ours. So we're excited for what the future holds here this week.
Yeah, we're super excited. You guys are not going to want to miss the guests that we'll be interviewing. So we'll see you in a second.
Hi, folks. We're here from SoConCon 2025 here in Indianapolis. We've got another great guest with me just now, a great colleague, great friend, one of my heroes, really, is Josh Hershberger from Indiana Family Institute, which is our host state family policy council for this conference. And they're doing an excellent job. Last night, they treated us to a reception in their state house here just down the street. And Josh, today we are fresh off of a plenary panel that I roped you into, but you did a great job with it. We were talking about the LGBT issue, and really for your part was about how it's intersecting with parental rights, which is a big issue area for both of us. So previously these have been kind of separate issue areas in our portfolio, but now they're overlapping. And you did a great job on the panel. I had you on there to do that, to talk about Indiana as a pioneer for parental rights in the face of LGBT ideology, because that is how that side of this issue is shifting. So tell us about this really historic thing that Indiana has done. First state in the nation, really first jurisdiction in the world to add some new protections to parental rights. Tell us what you did.
Joseph, thank you for the opportunity to join you on the podcast. I'm grateful for all that you do here and at FPA. It's just remarkable. It feels like a family of coming back to a group that care about the created order, about biblical principles being lived out in public life. It's a little bit like a family reunion, so it's great to be here. So as Joseph mentioned, we were able to pass a bill, HB 1412, that is fairly simple in its language. You sometimes see bills like the big, beautiful bill that they have to wheel around on a cart. It's so lengthy. This was actually two pretty simple provisions, and it simply says that raising or referring to your child consistent with their biological sex may not be considered abuse or neglect. First, that goes into the reporting section of the code. So many listeners may be familiar if someone believes that abuse or neglect is being directed towards a child, then mandated reporters have to report that to a hotline. And what we've clarified is from the very beginning, even if you have somebody that is an ideologue, maybe they're in the medical profession, maybe they're at a school, and they see that the parents are not affirming the transgender ideology of a child. This law would say, if you call it into DCS as abuse, there's going to be a very clear black letter law. Hey, that's not abuse. Now, if a parent is engaged in drug activity, harming a child physically or sexually, that, of course, will still be investigated by DCS. But we wanted to clarify that, go upstream to keep Christian families and other families that believe that we're created as male or female out of the system entirely. The other thing that the law does is it clarifies in our child in need of services section, so basically our child welfare section, that under any any section or chapter of that law, whether it's neglect, abuse, it's a child claiming self-endangerment, that in none of those chapters could raising or referring to your child consistent with their biological sex cannot be considered abuse. Now, this is probably a story that many Christians like, surely not. Surely, as a society, no, we're not going there. But I've represented a family that had their child pulled out of their custody over this issue and never returned prior to aging out. Many listeners may be familiar with what recently happened in Colorado with the law. Now the Colorado code saying if you misgender or quote unquote dead name, call a child by the name that you put on their birth certificate when they were born into this world, that you are engaged in discriminatory behavior. Washington State, California, Minnesota. And so we were looking at all of those and said, not in Indiana, not in Indiana. And so we're so grateful for the many legislators, the work of my colleagues at Indiana Family Institute, and truly this family, with Laura, with certainly the work of FPA, speaking into that, finally getting it across the finish line.
Yeah. What an achievement. I mean, it really is sad that we're at this place, Josh, like you said, we're in a society where this has to be done. But in a sense, this is what the law is for, is when the world seems to change around us, we have to re-articulate and reestablish truth in new and creative ways to protect those who are vulnerable to these threats. And this is a threat. Like you said, in Colorado, there is this bill that is pretty much, or this law now, sadly, that is pretty much the exact opposite of what you've done here. These are two separate worldviews. And it's going to be very interesting to see how and whether they can coexist in the same country. So I hope that our truth wins out as expressed in your law. But this is why we do what we do. It's why the FPCs do what they do, like IFI. It's why FPA stands by to support and assist you in that. And why SoConCon exists, so that we can galvanize our national allies, state legislators, to do these things on behalf of families. So we're just thankful for the leadership you all played, your legislators, obviously playing that role here in Indiana. But like I said, this is a worldwide thing. No country, no state has ever done this. And it's sad that we have to, but it's good that we can. So thank you for working on that. It's just tremendous. And we're going to try to export this to every state in the union. That's FPA's position, at least, is that every state, unfortunately, but necessarily, needs a law like HB 1412. So,
yeah. A lighter note follow-up is we've been publicizing this for folks that weren't aware. They would look at me like, we need a law on that. And it's like, yes, it took us all this time. And I explained to them all of that. And it's just, surely we didn't go there. But as you described, it is this worldview divide, a worldview crisis that we're facing. So yes, that was just kind of a light moment as we've been publicizing it.
No, I think we feel that way with a lot of things. This one more than most, but with a lot of the issues we work on, the FPC movement, it's like, we really have to do this, but yeah, we do. I think it was G.K. Chesterton who actually said the first duty of a Christian oftentimes is to restate the obvious. That's basically what we're doing. It should be self-evident. It's natural law that parents have the right to direct the upbringing of their children. So that's what we do in the FPC and the family policy movement. So, but Josh, that's not all that you did this year in the legislative session. So IFI is just a great rock in the FPC movement. For folks listening, they're one of 40 state family policy councils. You can find them all at familypolicyalliance.com/allies. Connect with your FPC. They're doing similar things to IFI. So to encourage people to do that, Josh, what else did you get done in the state legislative sessions this year?
So I'm happy to report that this was the most successful legislative session in IFI's history, with a number of great things that passed. Just to emphasize a few, we've talked about the Defining Child Abuse Act, HB 1412, but we also were able to pass a broader parental rights law that re-elevates in our law. And again, this is one of those, really, we have to say this, but that parental rights is a fundamental right. And that when a court comes to the state interfering with that right, that they have to do so using the highest form of judicial scrutiny. And the other issue that many believers, I think many conservatives are unaware of, is if the state comes and abrogates, comes against your rights, it's extremely difficult to go to federal court. And so we're having parents having to try to hire federal attorneys. This law allows parents to go down to their local courthouse square attorney, say, here's the cause of action, and we can go check and hold the state accountable. So that was a big win for us. I'm grateful for our whole team, as well as some national allies that helped with that. Something else that I think speaks to the movement as well is the girls' sports bill. So here in Indiana, we house the NCAA. In fact, the headquarters aren't too far from where we are sitting here. And so a few years ago, in fact, one of the legislators that's here, a Statesman alum, helped push our girls' sports law that just says, look, we're not going to have biological males competing in girls' sports. And it was one of the difficult things due to pushback was it was limited to high school, so K through 12. And we've been saying all along, well, what about our great college athletes? And just to bring this story home a little bit, speaking to a pastor recently whose daughter is in collegiate sports. And so this was not a theoretical issue for many. It's a real issue here. And so glad to report that this year we extended that all the way through college sports. And we made a statement right here in the heart of NCAA country. And it was interesting to see the NCAA pivot on this and move from very against it to even neutral. So it was great to see that. One other bill that we're very proud of, and just we think about the church, and we think about the true hope that people find in Jesus Christ. Well, many listeners are probably familiar with release time religious instruction. It's been legal for almost 70 years, maybe one of the greatest missed opportunities of the church, to have kids released from the public school to a Bible study, to a vacation Bible school, essentially, as long as it's off campus, okayed by the parents, and privately funded. Well, we had passed a law requiring the school corporations to allow that. And we've already got great stories about kids coming to know Jesus through that. But we ran into some complications with high schoolers, and we wanted to be able to clarify that they could obtain credit through that program so we could build out those high school programs. And so that also passed this session. So we're looking forward to seeing more of those programs.
Truly a holistically historic session for you all, Josh. We're just so proud of you. It's why it's so good that we're here for this conference this year in Indianapolis to celebrate all this, even with girls sports. Just last night, we were at a reception hosted at your state house, and we got the news in real time during the programming that the United States Olympic Committee had followed suit, banned men from competing in women's sports at the Olympic level for the United States, and cited our campaign through the President Trump's executive order on this. I mean, it felt like a consummation moment, an achievement of what this movement means. And you guys have fought for that. You stayed the course. You could have just settled for high school sports and you didn't. The courage to defy the NCAA is just fantastic, and why we do this. And it's nice to just be here so close to them, knowing that we're winning. So just thank you all for all that, and you blessing the state with these victories. So I want to give people a chance to connect with you, though, because as people can tell from how well you interview here, you're a podcast professional, too. Been doing it a lot longer than me. So just tell people how they can connect with you, with IFI, and tell us about the show, where they can find you.
Sure, and somebody asked me about that recently. I said, well, if after more than 350 times you can't figure it out, you probably should just, hang up the sneakers. But no, it is the Good Citizen podcast, and your host, Joseph, has been on the podcast to talk about age verification laws. And our goal is to think through how can Christians do the hard work of impacting their communities as Christian citizens, not just political punditry, some worldview analysis, but primarily individuals like Joseph and organizations like FPA that are doing the hard work here in the United States. So grateful for the opportunity to join you today.
Yeah, you got it. You guys are on social media. I know you're on every podcast platform, so people are interested. Can't recommend The Good Citizen enough. It was an honor to be on it. And Josh, it's always an honor and a pleasure to work with you. So thank you for this interview. Thank you for the plenary session earlier. And thank you for what a wonderful job you and Ryan McCann are doing hosting this conference here in Indianapolis. So thanks to our audience for listening. Hopefully you've enjoyed this segment. We'll be back with more segments like this from SoConCon 2025.
One of my favorite descriptions of the founding of the United States is that it was developed or founded on both humble faith and common sense, on Judeo-Christian principles and on moderate Enlightenment ideas. But this specific idea that all people are made in the image of God and worthy of equal dignity and protection of the law. Where did that idea come from? Well, it came straight from the created order. We think about the vastness, the beauty, the mystery of space, and it just emphasizes what I might term the greatest understatement in the universe. He made the stars also. In a sense, he was saying, yes, I did that too, but the crown of my creation is humanity. It's you, it's me. In their eyes, we see a spark of divinity. We see the fire of eternity. We see the image of an all-knowing, all-powerful creator God. And it is this beautiful truth that is at the very center of the church's public witness. I am concerned about Christians that put their citizenship on autopilot. When was the last time that as a Christian we said, hold on, time out, what does the Bible say about my role as a citizen in my city, state, and nation? In the United States today, we face what I might term a civil Cold War. I think we all feel it. We feel the increased polarization, the anger, the division in our body politic. What if we built strong churches? And what if those churches made disciples who made a difference? And what if those disciples, who just so happened to be good citizens, went out and impacted their zip codes? And what if in about 30 years, we could transform our cities, state, and nation through the power of the gospel?
Hey folks, we're back with more from SoConCon 2025 here in Indianapolis, and I'm really honored to be joined for this segment by one of our great national allies and friends. This is Dr. Kurt Miceli from Do No Harm Medicine, one of our great treasured national allies. For those who followed our Help Not Harm campaign, let me tell you, it just doesn't happen, the success we've seen, without our partnerships with Do No Harm, their complementary work in the legislatures, and their expertise on the medical industry and the medical systems. We're just so thankful to get to partner with you, Dr. Miceli, and we're glad to have you here at the conference. Do No Harm as a sponsor. Introduce to our audience at House to Home, just give them the brief description of what is Do No Harm.
Absolutely, and thanks for having me, Joseph. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to be at SoConCon 2025. Do No Harm is a membership organization. We're 24,000 plus physicians, nurses, providers, citizens, policymakers, all sorts of different folks who really are supportive of two main issues, and that's getting identity politics out of medicine and really keeping kids safe and getting this gender ideology also out of medicine as it impacts minors and such. And so we focus on getting medicine to be better by focusing on the quality, by focusing on what matters to patients, and not the ideology that has unfortunately corrupted the field.
Excellent. We're so supportive of your mission, and it overlaps tremendously with ours, which is why we've been able to collaborate on our work to protect kids from gender transition and gender ideology. So we just are fresh off a plenary panel we did here at the conference on this issue. We talked about the future of what that looks like, because as our audience knows from our previous shows, we've talked about the great ruling we got from the Supreme Court in a case called United States v. Scrimeti, which upheld 25 laws we've gotten passed in 25 states, protecting kids from the physiological aspect of gender transition. So that's puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and then the actual mutilating surgeries that cause irreversible damage to these poor kids. So we've got a great ruling from the Supreme Court that we celebrated in this panel, but we also talked about just where we go from here in the effort to protect kids, because the fight is far from over. There is an end point when we'll hopefully, God willing, we'll get there and we'll win, but we're a long ways from there. And we've got new phases in this fight. So Dr. Miceli, just briefly explain to our audience, where do you think we go from here? What do we have to pursue next from a policy perspective?
Yeah, no doubt, Joseph. There's been a lot of real positivity and a lot of excitement, and it's really important because, again, we really need to keep kids safe. We need to get gender ideology out of healthcare, out of our society, because it's really hurt minors significantly. And I think to your point, where do we go next? You're absolutely right. Scrimeti ruling, a super positive ruling. We have a lot of momentum that we're building upon with the Supreme Court, and also the action that the federal government has taken. When we look at actions that the FTC or Department of Justice or FBI, investigations that are being led really into a lot of criminal investigations, healthcare fraud, a lot of different challenges that are going on. But moving the needle forward, I think for us, one of the things that we talked about was the detransitioner Bill of Rights, the important fact of really keeping detransitioners, folks who have really suffered so many harms through the gender ideology, to help get them well, to help them actually have the right to justice, to the right to getting good quality medical care. And it's so important that we look and pass bills like the Detransitioner Bill of Rights in states to give detransitioners those rights, those supports, so that they can have their those healthcare needs met. They can feel the support and such. And in many other regards as well, we need to continue to work on all fronts, whether it's legislative, executive, by continuing to educate folks. One of the things that I found that really has struck me so much is that there's still so much education to do. I was speaking with a pediatrician just a couple of weeks ago, and great guy, does great work, and I was speaking to him about how does he handle the issue of kids who may come in with gender dysphoria and such. And his response is, well, I refer him to the gender clinic. And I thought, wow, that's really dangerous. What can we do to change that? How do we really get that awareness to understand that, unfortunately, these gender clinics are very much in a role of putting people into an affirming model, and of unfortunately getting them on puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and then surgeries and such. And I think for kids, it's just so critical to keep them safe, and we need to bring that awareness to continue to echo those sirens, so that not only citizens are aware, but our physicians are aware and recognize the harms that are caused. So a lot of work for us to continue to do.
Yes. But a lot of work that we're encouraged that we can get to do now, particularly because of Skirmeti. And we're obviously going to do everything we can to support the detransitioners' Bill of Rights, which is, as you mentioned, great piece of model legislation to protect detransitioners as they go forward. Because I want our audience to understand, I said this kind of talking point, I guess, earlier in our session, which is the medical industry does not like detransitioners. They're hostile to them because their very existence undermines the primary notion of gender ideology, the idea that some kind of alternative identity can be immutable. And the Supreme Court ruled that that's not true. Therefore, we can continue to pass these laws. But more than that, just at the human level, at the legislative level, we've gotten to work with detransitioners who are so courageous to come out and tell their story in the legislative setting. And for many of them, for many of these states where we've gotten our laws passed, their testimonies were sometimes the only thing that got us by. So this is the least I think we can do for them just as payback, but really they deserve this. And we think it's the next step in gender ideology. So maybe just another question or two for you, Dr. Miceli. You mentioned some of the federal wins that the Trump administration has done, that Congress has done. Maybe just mention one or two of those for our audience to be aware of, because you said education is so important. If they can go out and tell people in their world what's happening and help us with that education perspective, what can they share about the good things that's come out of Washington lately?
Absolutely. There's a lot. The FTC hearing was extraordinarily powerful from a few weeks ago, and even to look at things from the idea of the language that we use, the diagnostic codes that are provided. I think oftentimes this is the minutia of medicine, but when you look at it, you actually see even additional harms when you're taking care of someone who has gender dysphoria, yet it's being coded as endocrine disorder not otherwise specified or such. These are just lies. These are fraudulent claims, and it's so important for us to recognize that those practices are not only illegal, immoral, and so harmful. And so it's important for us to not allow the gender industry to hide under using different diagnostic codes, to hide in ways that that really allow these harms to continue. And so I think that's one of the key exposures, and really, in essence, of the false claims that are being made. Oftentimes many of the detransitioners, and certainly folks who are involved in the transition process as a child and such, they've just been presented this bill of goods that is just not true. We know when we look at the data that the evidence is just not there by any means to support any sort of benefit from pediatric medical transition. And the reality is that the harms are so great. And this is a terrible tragedy, especially when parents and children are entering a doctor's office. They're looking for that level of expertise. And rather, parents are being told, would you rather have a dead son or a living daughter, sort of being manipulated and almost threatened to go along with an affirming model that leads to puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and surgeries. And that really needs to change. And it's so important for us, and certainly in medicine, to continue to speak out and to raise our voice and to recognize that although there's this expert class of folks at the various medical societies, it's important for the ordinary doctors, the ordinary nurse practitioners, healthcare providers, nurses, everyone who's out there to really speak up and to recognize that the experts aren't right. They're not looking at the evidence. They're actually been totally misled and totally misguided and been taken by very much the politics, as opposed to looking at the people that we're supporting, the data that's out there. And that's what needs to change, at least in the medical community. And I think we're hopeful to start seeing some of that change.
I think we already are, thanks to all of you. I mean, that's one of the things I love about what you do is you're restoring integrity to this traditional field. This is one of the three oldest traditional professions is medicine. And the reality is people ought to be able to trust their doctors. They want to be able to trust their doctors. And that establishment has broken that trust, but do no harm is restoring it. and we want to just support you in that effort. So I completely agree. We're just glad to be a part of it. We want our audience to know that's what Do No Harm is doing. That's what we're going to partner with them to support them as they continue to do, is restore that integrity, that trustworthiness that people ought to expect from their physicians. So thank you for your work on that, Dr. Miceli. Thank you for being here at this conference. It's a treat to have you all here. This is your second year sponsoring. We're grateful to Do No Harm as sponsors. And then just beyond that, as partners, we're excited for what 2026 is going to bring us in terms of policy wins and beyond that, restoring trust to this field. So thanks to everyone for listening. We're going to be back with more segments from SoConCon